I sat at my kitchen counter, a freshly baked pumpkin pie cooling on the rack, holding my cell phone to my ear. It was 10 in the morning on Christmas Day. The condo was quiet, smelling of cinnamon and roasted coffee. I had been up since 6, carefully wrapping the last few gifts for my son David and his wife Sarah. When David finally answered the phone, I kept my voice cheerful. What time should I arrive for Christmas? There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of holiday music and the clinking of glasses. Oh. David mumbled, his voice dropping an octave. We already started. Before I could even process what he meant, there was a rustle of movement. Sarah had clearly grabbed the phone from his hand. Her voice came through the speaker crisp and entirely unapologetic. It's easier without you here, Georgia, she announced. My family is over and we just wanted a relaxed morning. You understand? She hung up. Just like that. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone across the room or collapse into a chair. I simply stood there, staring at the screen as it went dark. For 2 years, I had ignored the subtle disrespect. I had overlooked Sarah's snide comments about my clothes, my cooking, and my presence. I had convinced myself that David was just a passive man trying to keep the peace in his marriage. I looked at the pumpkin pie. I looked at the neatly wrapped boxes sitting by the door. Then I looked at my purse, resting on the kitchen island. Inside that purse was a wallet holding the primary credit card David and Sarah used for their daily expenses, the same account I paid off every month so they could save for their future. I picked up my phone again, but I didn't call them back. Instead, I opened my banking app. 3 hours later, my phone lit up. David was calling back, and he was screaming. In the 3 hours, between Sarah hanging up on me and David's frantic phone call, I completely dismantled the comfortable life they had built on my dime. I started with the bank. Logging into my main account, I found the joint credit card I had originally opened for David to use for household emergencies. Over the past year, emergencies had slowly morphed into organic grocery deliveries, designer shoes for Sarah, and expensive dinners out. I clicked the small toggle switch on the screen. Card locked. Next, I opened the utility management portal. 2 years ago, when my husband passed away, I downsized to this condo and let David and Sarah move into my 4-bedroom suburban house rent-free. I had left the electricity, water, and internet in my name, paying the bills automatically each month. I canceled the auto pay for the electricity and water, scheduling a transfer of service to their names effective immediately. Then I logged into the internet provider's app. I didn't just transfer that account. I paused the Wi-Fi router entirely. Finally, I opened the smart home app on my phone. The thermostat at the big house was set to a toasty 72 degrees. I dragged the digital slider down to 55. If Sarah's family wanted a relaxed, Georgia-free holiday, they could put on some sweaters. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. For years, I had operated out of guilt, terrified of losing my only son. I had let Sarah dictate the terms of our relationship, assuming that if I just gave enough, I would eventually earn my place at their table. I packed up the pumpkin pie, grabbed a bottle of wine from the fridge, and walked out my front door. My neighbor Martha was hosting a small brunch, and she had invited me the day before. I was sitting in Martha's cozy living room, laughing over a cup of spiked eggnog, when my phone began to vibrate violently in my pocket. David's name flashed across the screen. He wasn't just calling, he was panicking. I excused myself to Martha's guest bedroom and answered the phone. "Mom, what did you do?" David yelled. The background noise was chaotic. I could hear Sarah snapping at someone and a dog barking. "Merry Christmas to you too, David." I replied, my tone perfectly even. "The card declined," he shouted, completely ignoring my greeting. I was at the premium wine shop trying to pick up the champagne for dinner, and my card was declined in front of everyone. And the Wi-Fi is completely dead. Sarah's dad can't watch the football game, and the house is freezing. "Did you forget to pay the bills?" I didn't forget anything. I answered, staring out the window at the snow dusting the street. I locked the card and paused the internet. I also removed my autopay from the utilities. You'll need to set up your own accounts by tomorrow. Are you crazy? He stammered, the anger in his voice giving way to genuine shock. It's Christmas. You ruined our whole morning. Sarah made it very clear that things were easier without me there. I reminded him, keeping my voice steady. I simply assumed that applied to my wallet and my internet connection as well. You are both grown adults. You don't need my presence, so you certainly don't need my money. You can't just do this, Sarah shrieked. She had obviously put me on speakerphone. My entire family is here, and my house is hosting them, I pointed out gently. Enjoy your holiday. I ended the call. Immediately, the text messages started rolling in. Long, frantic paragraphs from David accusing me of being petty. Nasty, capitalized demands from Sarah ordering me to turn the heat back up. I didn't read past the first few lines. I swiped my phone to Do Not Disturb, slipped it back into my pocket, and returned to Martha's living room. For the first time in 2 years, the tightness in my chest was completely gone. The holiday felt light. I poured myself another glass of eggnog and smiled. The morning after Christmas, I woke up early. The quiet of my condo felt different today. It wasn't the lonely quiet I had grown used to since my husband passed. It was the quiet of absolute control. I brewed a strong pot of coffee and sat at my small dining table with a notepad. I needed to look at the reality of my situation without the filter of maternal guilt. I owned the large suburban house outright. My husband and I had paid off the mortgage 5 years before he died. When I let David and Sarah move in, the agreement was simple. They would live there rent-free for 2 years to save for a down payment on their own place. Those 2 years had expired 4 months ago. Whenever I brought up their savings, David would look at the floor while Sarah would quickly change the subject, citing the terrible housing market. Yet the housing market hadn't stopped them from leasing a brand new SUV or booking a luxury vacation to Cabo in October. I had been funding their lifestyle while they treated me like an annoying, distant relative. Sarah had even asked me a month ago to call ahead before coming over, claiming she needed her privacy in the house I owned. I finished my coffee and stood up. I didn't need to argue with them. I didn't need to demand respect or beg for inclusion. Respect isn't something you negotiate for. It's something you enforce through boundaries. I grabbed my coat and drove to the local hardware store. I walked straight to the moving and packing aisle, purchasing 10 large cardboard boxes and a roll of heavy-duty packing tape. The cashier wished me a happy holiday, and I smiled genuinely for the first time that week. I loaded the flattened boxes into the trunk of my car. I checked my watch. It was 10:30 in the morning. David and Sarah rarely woke up before noon on a holiday weekend. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out a heavy, silver keyring. It held the original keys to the big house. I hadn't used them in 2 years. Today, that was going to change. I pulled into the driveway of my own house. Sarah's family had clearly left the night before, leaving behind a trail of crushed wrapping paper on the front porch and an overflowing trash bin. I stepped carefully over a discarded ribbon, slid my key into the deadbolt, and turned it. The heavy wooden door swung open. The living room was a disaster area. Empty wine bottles cluttered the coffee table, and expensive gifts, many of which I recognized as brands they had bought using my locked credit card, were piled on the sofas. I dropped the stack of flattened moving boxes onto the hardwood floor. The loud smack echoed through the quiet house. Heavy footsteps pounded down the stairs. Sarah appeared on the landing, wearing an expensive silk robe, her face flushed with fury. "What are you doing?" she demanded, marching down the stairs. "You can't just walk in here. I told you to call before you come over." "Good morning, Sarah," I replied smoothly. "This is my house. I don't knock on my own front door. David hurried down the stairs behind her, running a hand through his messy hair. Mom, seriously. After the stunt you pulled yesterday, you just barge in. I brought you a gift. I announced, pointing to the cardboard boxes on the floor. Sarah stared at them, her expression twisting into a sneer. What is this garbage? Those are moving boxes, I explained, keeping my posture straight and my hands folded in front of me. Your 2-year agreement to live here rent-free ended in August. Since you clearly prefer a life without me in it, I am putting this house on the market. You have 30 days to pack your things and find a new place. David's jaw dropped. You're joking. You wouldn't sell the family house. It's my house, David. And I no longer wish to maintain a property for people who disrespect me. Sarah let out a sharp, mocking laugh. You won't do it. You're just throwing a tantrum because we wanted one day to ourselves. You'll calm down by next week. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just looked at her, smiled a very thin smile, and walked back out the front door. Sarah genuinely believed I was bluffing. For 3 days, my phone remained completely silent. No apologies, no compromises, not even a text message. They were playing a game of chicken, assuming the quiet old widow would eventually cave and turn the Wi-Fi back on. They didn't know I had spent those 3 days making phone calls. On Thursday morning, I arrived at the house at exactly 8 o'clock. I didn't come alone. I brought a professional deep cleaning crew of 4 people and a real estate photographer named Marcus, whom I had hired with cash. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, holding a travel mug of coffee. All right, ladies, I instructed the cleaning crew, pointing toward the messy kitchen. Start in there. Throw away any garbage on the counters. Move whatever you need to. The sound of industrial vacuums firing up and buckets clanking shattered the morning silence. Within seconds, David and Sarah stumbled out of their master bedroom, both looking horrified. What the hell is going on? Sarah shrieked over the noise of the vacuum. Staging day. I called back cheerfully, taking a sip of my coffee. I walked over to the heavy living room drapes and pulled them wide open, letting the harsh, bright winter sunlight flood the room. It highlighted every speck of dust and every empty wine glass they had left sitting around. Marcus, the photographer, started snapping test shots of the dining room. Flash. Flash. Mom, stop. David hurried down the stairs, nearly tripping over a vacuum cord. You can't do this. We haven't packed anything. You've had 3 days, I reminded him calmly. I told you the house is going on the market. The listing goes live on Monday. I suggest you start using those boxes I brought you. Sarah grabbed David's arm, her face pale. The reality of the situation had finally pierced through her arrogance. The luxury cars, the silk robes, the expensive dinners, none of it meant anything when you didn't own the roof over your head. You're really kicking your own son out into the cold, she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and sudden fear. I looked her dead in the eye. You're not in the cold, Sarah. You have 27 days left. The cleaning crew moved efficiently upstairs, forcing David and Sarah to retreat to the kitchen. I stood near the entryway, watching Marcus photograph the freshly wiped counters. David walked up to me, nervously rubbing the back of his neck. He looked exhausted. The confident, dismissive son from Christmas morning was gone, replaced by a man realizing his safety net had vanished. Mom, can we talk? He asked quietly. I glanced toward the kitchen. Sarah was leaning against the refrigerator, watching us intensely. She gave David a sharp nod. Go ahead, I offered, leaning against the doorframe. Look, we're sorry about Christmas. He mumbled, reciting the words as if reading from an invisible teleprompter. Sarah was just stressed with her family visiting. We shouldn't have cut you out. We appreciate everything you do for us. Just cancel the photographer. We'll start paying you a little rent, okay? I studied his face. There was no genuine remorse there, only panic. He wasn't apologizing because he realized he had hurt me. He was apologizing because his lifestyle was currently being vacuumed into cardboard boxes by my cleaning crew. Apologies don't pay property taxes, David, I answered softly. And they don't change the fact that you allowed your wife to treat me like a nuisance in the home I provided for you. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked, taking it hesitantly. "The utility transfer confirmations I explained. The water and power are officially in your name as of midnight tonight. You'll need to set up your own internet too. And, David, since my credit card is no longer active, you'll need to put a deposit down with the utility company. I believe it's $300. His eyes widened. $300, Mom. We don't have that right now. The holidays drained us. You'll have to figure that out, I replied, turning away to signal the photographer into the next room. I am no longer managing your budget. I walked out to my car, leaving him holding the envelope in the middle of a perfectly staged, spotless living room that was no longer his. By Monday morning, the listing was live. My phone buzzed constantly with showing requests. The market in our suburb was incredibly tight, and a beautifully maintained 4-bedroom house priced to sell was a rare prize. I managed the showing schedule with absolute precision. I approved tours during the evenings and on weekends exactly the times David and Sarah usually relaxed. I would park down the street in my small sedan and watch. I saw them hurrying out of the house, lugging trash bags full of clothes into the trunk of their expensive leased SUV to hide their clutter from potential buyers. They looked miserable. Without my credit card, the reality of their financial choices hit them like a freight train. Sarah couldn't order her daily premium coffees. David had to cancel his expensive gym membership just to keep the lights on. I learned from Martha, who heard it through the neighborhood grapevine, that Sarah had begged her parents to let them move in. Her parents, who had happily enjoyed my house on Christmas Day, had refused, claiming they didn't have the space. On day 15, I received an all-cash offer for the house 5% over the asking price. The buyers wanted a 30-day close. I signed the digital paperwork on my tablet while drinking a cup of green tea on my balcony. I sent David a simple text message. "The house is officially under contract. You must be completely moved out by the 25th. He replied a minute later, "Mom, please. Rents are insane right now. We can only afford a 1-bedroom apartment across town. It's tiny." Sarah is furious. I stared at the message. A year ago, reading that would have twisted my stomach into knots. I would have felt the overwhelming urge to fix it, to rescue my boy, to open my checkbook, and make the bad feelings go away. Today, I felt nothing but quiet clarity. I typed my response carefully. A 1-bedroom apartment is a great place to start saving. Good with the packing. I put my phone on silent, picked up my book, and let the afternoon sun warm my face. I wasn't just selling a house. I was buying back my peace of mind. The 25th of the month arrived with a bitter winter chill. I pulled into the driveway at exactly noon for the final walkthrough. The house looked entirely different, empty. The sprawling rugs and heavy furniture were gone, leaving only the scuffed hardwood floors and the echo of my footsteps. David and Sarah were standing in the kitchen, zipping up their heavy winter coats. A few rogue trash bags sat near the back door. Sarah looked exhausted. The expensive blowout she usually maintained was tied back in a messy knot, and she wouldn't even meet my eyes. "You left some bags by the door." I pointed out, my voice echoing off the bare walls. David sighed, rubbing his temples. "We couldn't fit everything in the U-Haul. We're coming back for it." "The buyers take possession at 4 o'clock, I reminded him, checking my watch. "Make sure it's gone by 3. "I'm locking up," Sarah finally snapped her frustration boiling over. I hope you're happy, Georgia. You completely ruined our lives over one stupid phone call. I turned to face her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I didn't ruin anything. Sarah? I answered, my tone dangerously calm. I simply stopped cushioning the consequences of your own choices. You lived here free for 2 years. You chose to buy luxury cars instead of saving. You chose to insult the woman paying your bills. The only person who ruined your life is you. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She grabbed her purse, pushed past me, and stormed out the front door, the hinges groaning as she slammed it shut behind her. David lingered for a moment. He looked around the empty kitchen, the place where he had spent the last 2 years pretending he was a successful homeowner. Where are we supposed to go from here, Mom? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You go to work, David. You pay your rent. You grow up. I held out my hand. He stared at it for a long moment before reaching into his pocket. He dropped his set of house keys into my palm. Goodbye, David, I murmured. He walked out. I locked the deadbolt, the heavy metallic click echoing through the empty hall. 6 months later, the summer heat had finally settled over the city. I was sitting on the balcony of my condo, sipping iced tea and looking out over the small manicured courtyard. The sale of the big house had closed without a single issue. The massive check had cleared my bank account just a few days later. With that money, I completely upgraded my condo, booked a 2-week cruise to Alaska for the fall, and padded my retirement accounts. David called me occasionally. The dynamic between us had permanently shifted. The conversations were brief and polite, stripped of the old entitlement. He and Sarah were living in a cramped apartment near the highway. According to him, Sarah was currently working overtime at a retail job to help cover their car payments. He tried a few times to drop heavy hints about how tight money was. He would mention an unexpected dental bill or a spike in gas prices, pausing to leave space for me to step in and offer my credit card. I never did. I would simply reply, "That sounds difficult. I'm sure you two will budget accordingly." He eventually stopped asking. I realized sitting there in the warm afternoon sun that setting a boundary didn't mean my son would suddenly change into a perfect, grateful person. Sarah would probably blame me for their financial struggles for the rest of her life. David would always be a little too passive, a little too eager to take the easy way out. But their flaws were no longer my daily emergency. I took a long sip of my iced tea. My phone chimed on the small patio table. It was a text from Martha asking if I wanted to join her at the new bistro downtown for dinner. I smiled, picked up the phone, and typed back, "I'd love to. My treat." I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair. For decades, I had defined my worth by how much I could provide for my family, enduring quiet disrespect just to keep a seat at their table. It took a single, cruel phone call to show me the truth. You don't have to fight for a seat at a table where you aren't respected. You can simply stand up, take your wallet, and build a much better table of your own.